What's poppin', everyone? It's VenomousStare back with more high-level StarCraft 2. This time we have two exceptional Korean players. Hurricane, the Protoss in the top left, a frequent GSL round of 32 placer. His opponent, Innovation, one of the four horsemen of Terran, widely considered one of the best players of all time, rivaling MVP as far as best Korean Terrans ever. This is a guy who can crush people with his macro, but can also play multiple styles and even mix in a few cheeses. But in general, we see Innovation go for standard macro play, and he just does the macro mechanic aspect of the game better than everyone else. He doesn't miss depots. He constantly produces units. You know, he doesn't focus too much on his army over here and forget to make stuff. And it might seem like a very rudimentary basic thing, but StarCraft 2, even at the highest level, is all about getting the basics perfect. And the more crisp you can be, the better off you will be. The more corners you can cut, the further ahead you will get. And of course, if you never make silly mistakes like missing depots, then that means that you're going to be ahead of your opponent, even if they just miss a few supply depots or pylons or overlords throughout the game. It actually does add up, and a lot of new players don't really understand this, but as we see a Reaper coming out, so there's not much going on in the early game, as both players are going to expand standard stuff. So I'm going to talk about macro a little more in depth since we have a couple minutes here. So if you just watch Innovation carefully, he's always producing units at home whenever he needs to be. Even if he's being aggressive and focusing on his army, he's very good at always keeping production going at home. And quite honestly, this is what holds a lot of new players back, as we see Innovation taking his second gas around 2 minutes, and the Reaper will come out here. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean that holds a lot of new players back? Well, the average new player, if you look at the replay and just look up here in the top right, which is where you should be looking whenever you view a replay a lot of the time, a new player, as we see a Stargate here for Hurricane, an inexperienced player will get supply blocked frequently. They will float money, which means even if they have enough workers, like they're adequately producing workers constantly, if they're not creating enough unit producing facilities, as we see this Reaper is not long for this world, I dare say. Actually, yeah, it gets away. Always going to go back in. Once this Adept comes out, you're really not going to see a lot of Reaper action. Of course, the Phase Shade's pretty useful at catching it. And if Inno got trapped here, we can see beautiful SimCity here from the Protoss player. And what do I mean by SimCity? The way that your buildings are placed. And since he placed the Cyber and the Stargate flush against the corner of the map, off over here into space, it meant that when Innovation ran his Reaper back here, he couldn't run around and skirt around and be obnoxious with his Reaper. Kind of got trapped. So you have to be careful of that whenever you are playing Terran and looking around with your Reaper. Now Innovation saw the Stargate, so it's really not that big of a deal because that first Reaper, although it is nice to keep, really the main thing you want to do is see the first building that Protoss makes after this Cyber Core. Usually it's Stargate, Robo, or Twilight is what you want to look for, one of those. Recently, Twilight's been getting a lot of popularity and receiving a lot of play. But it's hard to go wrong with Stargate because an Oracle is so incredibly good against Terran. If they're not ready for it, which really Innovation is always going to be ready for something as standard as an Oracle, but if you're not ready for it, it can do devastating worker damage. And even if it doesn't, it can play Stasis Wards to help out in the mid-game. A mine is out here for Inno, so if Hurricane gets close, he could die easily. Now this is, go there, ooh, it locked, but Hurricane ran away. So Hurricane knows that there are Widow Mines afoot, so he has to be careful, and this means that this Oracle is pretty much gutted in terms of the initial worth. Now this is what's so great about Oracles. Innovation defended literally perfectly. He didn't even make a turret, but because he made a Viking, placed a Widow Mine beautifully, and had his units in the perfect position, the Oracle got next to no damage done. But why is the Oracle so good? Because even though it was deflected, it can now use Revelation, which is extraordinarily powerful in the mid-game. It reveals all units, even hidden, cloaked, burrowed units. So Hurricane's going to press up here with the 3 Stalker, 2 Adept pressure, but with Widow Mines out, a bunker, and a landed Viking. There's the Revelation, though. And the Stalkers do outrange the mines a bit. Inno pushes up here with the Gym Rainers. Tries to protect the mines. One of them falls. Now notice whenever Innovation walks on top of the mine, it's very hard for the mine to be focus fired, as a third base is thinking about being taken here for Hurricane. Adepts are going to be shaded into the main. Innovation, incredibly good macro player, is not going to let that slide. This is why you want to wall off, even in non-Zerg matchups. The bunker is going to hold off the Stalkers here pretty well. Because remember, Stalkers are support units. They're not actually that good at bulldozing through a front door, especially without Blink. Of course, Blink is not even being researched because it was a Stargate opener. Forge is out here though, and the Twilight does finish. Usually we see Resonating Glaives here, and we do. So the Protoss player Hurricane is transitioning into the mid-late game. I guess it's more of the mid game. Although with this setup, he will be pictured pretty well to go into the late game, as we see +1 attack and Resonating Glaives on the way. Now another revelation occurs here, and that's brilliant. This is what I was talking about earlier, with always wanting to keep an eye on the army. Now the thing is he didn't revelate a lot there, so with power of deduction, he should be able to figure out that there is a drop afoot or that his army is being moved. And considering he's flying around, it's probably not just a normal move out, it's probably a drop, just like we see here. And beautiful, beautiful photon overcharge before any damage gets done. And Hurricane uses Revelation on the army there, so great move. Now Hurricane, seeing exactly what's out, is going to be able to try to pressure forward here. And Innovation stems perfectly. Great micro there, as Innovation's flawless reaction actually made that a decent trade. And Innovation gets pushed back, but he did clear out that proxy pylon. A Viking comes out here. Vikings are surprisingly useful against Phoenix, because Phoenix are good at poking and prodding and running around, and Vikings have such good range. They can kind of just shut that down a little bit. Now, it's not like a hard counter, it's more of just kind of a please get away from me, and it prevents you from being abused. Sort of like having Spore Crawlers versus Phoenix PBZ. Now, another engagement's going to occur here as Innovation presses forward down onto this ramp, and the Protoss player thought about pressing up, but between the mines and the Viking, he was like, well, you know, I'll just fight onto these pylons. There's really no reason to fight off of them. Adept Shades going forward there. This is a great move to always be pressuring, and there they go. Adept Shades forward, and he does take them. The Phoenix lift up the mines, which is kind of the crux of Phoenix Adept, but this is what's so tricky about Phoenix Adept, is all it takes is one little miss micro, and it's all going to go downhill as the Phoenix take huge splash, are virtually unable to fight like Gohan after the Cell Saga. And with Innovation having a third base and pressuring this third, I dare say our Terran player is ahead, especially with the 20 supply advantage. Obs and Immortal coming from the double robo of Hurricane. But the thing about Phoenix Adept is once you lose your Phoenix count, you're in this weird position because the Phoenix are responsible for taking care of all of the money units of the Terran, the mines, the libs, and suddenly some Adepts are going to be shaded here and split, and the mines pretty much clean up most of the Adepts immediately. The Phoenix come in here, but Hurricane is plummeting in supply. He'll throw down another overcharge, but Innovation is just completely free to sit back and be positionally intelligent and siege with Liberators, because he has the third base alive and kicking. It has a lot of income, it's being mule hammered. Double Robo is producing Immortals, but Stim comes out here. The Immortal will be focused, in a friendly fire there actually damages the Medivacs pretty severely. But at this point, Hurricane just can't hold, and Innovation does what he does best, which is macro and pressure in equal parts, and do it efficiently and incredibly well. And shout out to Rifkin and Zombie Grub, because I found this replay on the internet, but apparently it was one of their games, so shout out to BaseTrade. But that was the end of the game, and if you enjoyed the commentary, make sure to subscribe. And I also made a Company of Heroes 2 video, which is a World War II RTS, if you're interested in that. Have a good one.